After my father's funeral, my stepmother held me close and said, "Don't leave me alone tonight." Elia's ward stood in the soft morning light, his eyes fixed on the freshly turned earth where his father now rested. He had always imagined funerals as moments of closure, but this one left him with more questions than answers. Something in the air seemed wrong. The wind didn't blow naturally. Shadows stretched unnaturally long. Even the birds that usually filled the sky were quiet, as if they too felt the tension. Beside him, Marrow, his stepmother, held herself tight against the chill. Her eyes, usually calm and composed, darted nervously from side to side. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost a whisper, carrying a weight that made Elias shiver. "Don't leave me alone tonight," she said, pulling him closer. Elias felt a strange shiver run down his spine. The words sounded almost like a plea, but there was more to them, an urgency that made him glance at her with suspicion and concern. Marrow had never been like this before. She was always careful, composed, and rational. Now, her grip on him was tight enough to leave marks. Something in the tone of her voice suggested fear, not of what humans usually fear, but something else, something deeper. He wanted to ask her why, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded silently, feeling the heaviness of the moment settle around them. Funeral rituals had ended, people were dispersing, and yet neither of them moved. It was as if the world had paused for them, leaving them alone with the grief that clung to their bones. The drive home was quiet. Elias watched the passing landscape in silence. The sky had a strange, metallic hue to it, like silver clouds drifting against a pale blue canvas. Streetlights flickered as they passed, and for a moment he thought he saw shadows moving with a life of their own, just out of the corner of his eye. He shook his head, blaming exhaustion and grief. His father's funeral had drained him more than he expected. Once they reached home, Marrow motioned for him to stay seated in the living room. The house itself seemed different. The familiar creaks of the wooden floors sounded sharper, almost deliberate, as if the building were aware of their presence. Elias tried to shrug it off as his imagination, but the uneasy feeling would not leave him. The smell of old wood and the faint scent of his father's cologne lingered in the air, though the man was gone. It was a reminder of absence, a presence that still clung to the house in strange, quiet ways. Marrow lit the fireplace, though it wasn't cold enough to need it. The flames cast flickering shadows on the walls, creating shapes that twisted and stretched unnaturally. She handed Elias a cup of tea, her hands trembling slightly. "You'll want to rest," she said softly, avoiding his gaze. Her words were calm, but her eyes betrayed a storm of fear. Elias could see it now in small details. The way her fingers twitched, the way her lips pressed tightly together, and the way she occasionally glanced toward the corners of the room as though expecting something to emerge from the shadows. He took a sip of tea and nodded. "I'll stay," he said, trying to sound confident, but inside a storm of questions raged. Why had she asked him not to leave her alone? What was she afraid of? And why did the house feel wrong? Elias had always loved this home. It had been a place of safety, of warmth, of family. Now it felt like a cage, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen, was waiting for them. Hours passed slowly. Elias tried to distract himself by looking through old photographs, relics of his father's life. Some pictures were ordinary, family vacations, birthdays, school events, but others were peculiar. In one photograph, his father stood in the middle of a field, surrounded by tall, unnatural shadows that did not match the light or the shapes of the objects around him. In another, the sky was darker than it should have been, streaked with colors that Elias could not name. Something about these photographs made his stomach twist. Marrow sat across from him, quietly observing him as he studied the pictures. Her expression was unreadable, but there was tension in the way she held her body. The fire crackled, and Elias noticed that the shadows on the walls seemed to move differently, almost like they were observing him. The idea made him uneasy. He shook it off, trying to remember that grief can play tricks on the mind. Then came the sound. A soft tapping coming from somewhere in the house. Elias froze. He could hear it now, a rhythmic knock like someone gently hitting the walls. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his voice breaking the silence. Mero nodded, her face pale. "I hear it," she said. Her voice was low, almost a murmur, but there was no hesitation. She seemed certain, afraid, yet calm in her fear. Elias didn't understand. Normally, Mero dismissed strange sounds as old house noises or the wind. But tonight she spoke with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. The tapping grew louder, moving through the house as if it were exploring. Elias could feel a presence, not human, not entirely tangible, but aware. Something was in the house, and it knew they were there. His father's death, the funeral, the unusual shadows, and now this. It all seemed connected in ways he could not yet understand. Mero stood and moved toward the door of the study, her hand brushing along the wall as if to sense something invisible. "It's okay," she said softly, though her voice wavered. "It won't hurt us if we stay together." Her words were more comforting than they sounded. Elias wanted to believe her, but the unease gnawed at him, growing stronger with every passing moment. He followed her into the study. The room smelled faintly of old books and wax. It was his father's room, preserved in a way that felt almost ritualistic. Elias noticed that the objects on the desk seemed to hum slightly, vibrating with a frequency that made his teeth tingle. There were stacks of papers, notebooks filled with cryptic symbols and maps marked with strange annotations. One notebook lay open, revealing his father's handwriting, jagged, hurried, almost frantic. Elias read a passage aloud. "They are observing, but not as we know. They record presence, not actions. They learn from emotion." His voice shook slightly. Who are they?" he asked, looking at Mero. She swallowed hard. "Your father, he worked on something he didn't tell us fully, something the world isn't ready for. These observers, they test us in ways we can't understand, and right now they're watching." Elias felt a chill so sharp it burned his skin. "Watching us? Why?" he asked. Mero looked down at her hands. "Because humans are unpredictable, unique, powerful in ways no one else is. Your father knew they would come, and he tried to prepare us. But even he could not see everything." For a long moment, the only sounds in the room were the crackling fire and the faint tapping that had not stopped. Elias realized then that fear had taken root, not just in the house but in him. Yet beneath the fear there was something else, curiosity. Something primal in him wanted to understand, to face whatever watched from the shadows. It was a part of him that made him human. He sat back in his chair, staring at the notebook. The words seemed to pulse with energy, as if alive. "What do we do?" he asked finally. Mero looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "We stay together, we observe, and we remember what your father taught us. Humanity is more than flesh and blood. It's courage, it's presence, it's connection. We can't let them take that from us." Elias nodded, understanding now the weight of her earlier words. "Don't leave me alone tonight" was not a plea of weakness. It was a call to remember, to stand together, to prove that humanity could endure even when confronted with the unknown. Outside, the night deepened, and the shadows in the house grew longer. The tapping continued, rhythmic and patient. But inside, Elias and Mero sat together, a small island of warmth, defiance, and presence in a world that seemed to be testing them at every turn. For the first time since the funeral, Elias felt a spark of hope. The night was long, the house alive with mysteries and the observers silent, but they were not yet defeated. As long as they stayed together, human strength, the kind no one else could replicate, was enough. And so the first night passed, tense, filled with quiet observation and a subtle understanding. The world was not done testing humanity, but neither would humanity bow to fear. The night stretched on slowly, filled with small noises that Elias had never noticed before. The house seemed alive. every creak and groan like it was breathing. Shadows shifted across the walls, but they didn't match any objects in the room. Elias could not tell if they were tricks of the firelight or something else entirely. He shivered, pulling his blanket closer, but he did not move away from Marrow. She sat quietly beside him, watching the shadows as if she could see them better than he could. "This house, it feels different now," Elias said, breaking the silence. "Almost aware." Marrow nodded, her face tense. "Your father knew it would be. That's why he kept things here, why he built protections." Her voice faltered for a moment, but she regained her calm. "This house is more than wood and stone. It remembers, it responds, it waits." Elias frowned. "Waits for what?" Marrow looked away toward the dark corners of the room. "For us to be ready," she said softly. "For us to be present." He frowned. The words made sense but also sounded like a riddle. What could require human presence so badly that a house itself would respond? He wanted to ask more, but the sound stopped him. A new sound now filled the room, a low humming, soft but constant, vibrating through the floor. It was not wind. It was not any normal house noise. It seemed deliberate, controlled, intelligent. Elias stood up and walked toward the center of the room. The hum grew stronger and he could feel it in his chest, a strange resonance that made his heartbeat race. "Do you feel it?" he asked Marrow. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's them, the Watchers. They are observing." "Who are they?" Elias asked, though part of him already feared the answer. "They are not like us," Marrow said, turning toward him. Her eyes reflected both fear and determination. "They see humans, but they don't understand us. They try to control, to measure, to predict. Your father, he called them observers, and right now they are testing us." Elias felt a chill. "Testing us? For what?" His voice trembled slightly. Marrow's gaze softened, but it held a sharp edge of urgency. "To see what humans do under pressure, to see if we give up when we face the unknown." She paused, then said firmly, "But humans are never predictable. That is why they fear us. That is why your father tried to prepare us." Elias thought of the notebook he had seen earlier, the maps and cryptic symbols. He began to understand that his father had been part of something far bigger than family, far bigger than ordinary life. Something cosmic, something alien, but not hostile, not exactly. But something that could judge, observe, and test humans in ways they couldn't yet understand. He glanced around the room. The walls seemed to pulse slightly, as if breathing with the rhythm of the humming. Shadows shifted. The fire flickered, throwing light across the room in strange, jerking patterns. For a moment, Elias thought he saw shapes, figures in the darkness, but whenever he blinked, they vanished. "This is real," he whispered, almost to himself. "It's not just in my head." Marrow reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. "It is real, and it is dangerous in its own way, but danger is not the same as harm. They test us, that's all. They want to see if we stay, if we endure." Elias swallowed hard. He felt fear, yes, but also a strange surge of determination. He had always thought courage was doing what scared you, even when it seemed impossible. But now, courage was more than that. It was staying present. It was resisting forces that could not be fought with fists or weapons. It was human. Hours passed. The humming continued, low and patient. The fire crackled, and the shadows on the walls twisted and coiled like living things. Elias tried to read from his father's notebook again, but the words seemed to shift before his eyes. Symbols he thought he remembered were no longer there, replaced by new ones he could not decipher. It was as if the house and the observers were rewriting reality around him, testing him for attention, awareness, and focus. Suddenly, a shadow moved differently than the rest. It didn't flicker with the fire. It flowed across the floor, climbing walls in ways that defied physics. Elias froze, staring. Marrow stood beside him, calm, but her eyes narrowed. "They're curious," she said. "They watch humans differently than any other life they have seen. Most species react predictably. Humans are unique. That scares them." Elias felt a mixture of fear and pride. He had never thought about humans in this way before. To an alien intelligence, humans were unpredictable. Their emotions, their presence, their connections, they could not be measured, simulated, or replaced. That thought gave him courage, but it also made the humming feel heavier, more pressing. He stepped forward slowly, toward the moving shadow. It pulsed and shifted, almost like liquid darkness, but it did not attack. Instead, it seemed to study him, to test his reaction. He raised his hand slightly, as if to show he meant no harm. The shadow recoiled slightly, then returned to its place in the corner. Marrow's hand found his again. "It is testing patience," she whispered. "Do not flinch, do not run. Humans endure, that is our power." Elias nodded, swallowing hard. He realized she was right. Panic would not help them. Fear alone would not save them. But staying, being present, alert, and aware, that could make all the difference. Minutes stretched into hours. The hum shifted, the shadows twisted, but nothing touched them. Elias could feel his body trembling from adrenaline and fear, but he did not move from Marrow's side. He watched, learned, observed, and waited. Slowly, he began to understand patterns in the shadows, in the hum, even in the house itself. It responded to his thoughts, his presence, and his emotions. It was alive in a way he had never imagined. Then came the whispers. Not human voices, not in any language he recognized, but soft murmurs that seemed to flow through the air. They were layered, overlapping, almost musical, carrying emotions rather than words. Curiosity, surprise, calculation, and doubt. Elias realized the observers were not just watching, they were learning. They wanted to understand humans, and humans resisted understanding by being unpredictable. The idea fascinated him. It was terrifying, but it was also proof that humans mattered. Marrow looked at him, her eyes wide in wonder. "They are learning," she whispered. "Your father wanted this. He hoped they would see. Humans cannot be predicted, cannot be copied, cannot be controlled." Elias nodded, determination rising inside him. "Then we show them," he said softly. "We show them who we are." The night continued, each hour a test of endurance, patience, and courage. Elias and Marrow remained together, speaking little, observing much. The house, alive with whispers, shadows, and humming, seemed to watch their every move. The observers, patient and calculating, had not yet tested their limits, but they were close. Elias could feel it, a subtle pressure like gravity in reverse. It was an invisible force, nudging, probing, learning. Finally, as the first pale light of dawn touched the windows, the house seemed to sigh, a low vibration that resonated through the walls and floors. The shadows settled. The humming receded. The whispers faded, leaving only silence. Elias looked at Marrow. She was tired but calm. Her hand still held his, and for the first time since the funeral he felt a sense of quiet victory. They had survived the night, faced the unknown together, and endured. Humanity, fragile and mortal, had not only endured, it had made an impression. Marrow smiled faintly. "They will come again," she said softly. "But we are ready. Together we are more than they can understand." Elias nodded, understanding the truth in her words. The observers were patient, calculating, intelligent, but humans were unpredictable. Human courage, presence, and connection were forces no alien could fully comprehend. And that was humanity's strength. That was the legacy his father had left him. As the sunlight filled the room, Elias realized something important. The house, the observers, the shadows, all of it was part of a larger test. But humans, by simply being human, present, aware, connected, could face anything. And they would not bow, they would not break, they would endure. The first night was over, the test had begun. And humanity, in the form of Elias and Marrow, had already begun to show its strength. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, painting the study in soft gold light. Elias sat beside Marrow, still processing the events of the night. The house had quieted, but the air felt heavier than before. Something lingered in the corners, something patient, observant, and unseen. Elias could still feel the hum beneath his feet, the subtle vibration that made the walls seem alive. He knew the observers had not left, they were still there, waiting for the next opportunity to test humanity. Marrow poured 2 cups of tea, her hands steady but her eyes watchful. "The first night is always the hardest," she said, handing him a cup. "They test fear first. Curiosity and courage come later." Elias nodded, taking a sip. The warmth grounded him, but it did not calm the knot of tension in his stomach. "How long will they test us?" he asked. "Until they understand us." Marrow shook her head. "They never fully understand. That is why humans are dangerous in their eyes. We cannot be predicted, we cannot be controlled, and they are learning that slowly." Elias looked down at the notebook he had opened the night before. The pages were filled with symbols, notes, and strange diagrams that seemed to pulse with meaning. He traced a finger along one line, wondering how his father had known so much about these watchers. Did father know this would happen to us?" "Yes," Marrow said, her gaze softening. "He knew, he prepared for it, but even he did not know everything. The Watchers are ancient. They have observed countless species. Humans are unique. That is why he built this house, these protections, these safeguards." Elias leaned back, feeling a mix of awe and fear. Ancient beings observing, testing, learning, and humans, fragile and mortal, were expected to face them without faltering. But the thought of his father's foresight gave him courage. Humans had survived before against impossible odds. They could survive this too. A sudden shift in the air made both of them freeze. The temperature dropped slightly, and the shadows in the room lengthened unnaturally. Elias could feel it in his chest, an awareness, a presence that was no longer just background noise. The Watchers were closer now, observing directly. Marrow stood and moved to the center of the room, her hands lifted slightly as if to sense the air itself. "They are here," she whispered. "They want to see our reaction. Do not show fear, Elias, show presence, that is our strength." Elias nodded, standing beside her. He felt the vibration of the floor beneath him grow stronger, as though the house itself were communicating with the Watchers. He clenched his fists, grounding himself. Humans endured. Humans faced what came. He would not flinch. Suddenly, a form began to take shape in the room. It was translucent, luminous and vaguely humanoid, but not quite human. Its edges shimmered and shifted, as though it existed in more than one dimension at once. Its face, if it could be called that, was featureless, but Elias felt its gaze. It was not hostile, but it was calculating, studying, measuring, learning. Marrow placed a hand on his arm. "They can read more than our actions," she said. "They sense thought, emotion, presence. You must show them what it means to be human." Elias swallowed hard. He focused on the emotions that had carried him through the night: grief, love, courage, and determination. He allowed them to flow through him, deliberately, openly. The Watcher paused, its form flickering as if trying to process what it sensed. "You are different," Marrow said softly, almost in awe. "They have not seen this before. They expect fear, retreat, doubt. But humans," she smiled faintly, "humans endure." The Watcher shifted again, slowly circling them. Its movement was deliberate, careful, like it was learning the shape and strength of their presence. Elias could feel its attention focused entirely on them. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply existed, aware and steady, showing that humanity could not be measured or controlled. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire. The Watcher's form shimmered, sometimes bright, sometimes almost invisible, always observing. Elias began to notice patterns, the way it reacted to his breathing, the way its form pulsed when Marrow spoke, the subtle vibrations in the floor when he focused on his own emotions. They were being tested, yes, but the test was more than endurance. It was recognition that humans were alive not just in body but in mind, heart, and spirit. Marrow finally spoke, breaking the tense quiet. "Your father left instructions," she said, pointing toward the notebook. There are ways to communicate with them, to guide them without fear. You must learn. They respond to clarity, to intent, to presence. Elias approached the desk and opened the notebook again. Symbols shifted as his eyes passed over them, responding to his attention. He traced a line with his finger, feeling the resonance of the words. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, directions, methods, gestures that humans could use to interact with the Watchers. It was like learning a new language, one that relied not on sound or sight, but on energy and emotion. He practiced the gestures, moving his hands in slow arcs, focusing on steady, calm energy. The Watcher paused, studying him, then mirrored his motions in a way that made Elias' heart race. It was a silent acknowledgement, a recognition that humans could engage, could communicate, could respond in ways the Watchers had not expected. Mara watched, her eyes shining with pride. "See," she whispered, "your father knew. Humans are not passive. We create presence. We make ourselves seen." The Watcher's form began to shift again, slowly becoming less alien and more familiar, like it was trying to approximate something human. Elias felt a thrill of realization. It was learning. They were teaching it what it meant to observe humans, not just measure them. The Watcher, ancient and calculating, was adapting to humanity. But just as relief began to settle, another sensation rippled through the room, a second presence. Elias froze, recognizing the subtle difference in the vibration. The first Watcher was curious, cautious, and controlled. The second was impatient, testing, probing more aggressively. Marrow's expression darkened. "They are not all the same," she said. "Some are patient, some are harsher. You must remain calm. You must endure." The second Watcher appeared suddenly, larger than the first, more defined and moving faster. It circled them quickly, sending ripples through the floor and air. Elias could feel the intensity of its observation, sharper than anything he had felt before. Fear threatened to rise, but he remembered Marrow's words: presence, endurance, humanity. He drew a slow breath and let it anchor him. "This is the challenge," Marrow said quietly. "We endure together. That is what makes us human." Elias focused on the emotions that defined him: grief for his father, love for his family, courage in the face of the unknown. He let the feelings radiate outward, steady and strong. The Watcher slowed, its motion uncertain, flickering. The first Watcher approached, merging its presence with the second. Together they studied him, and Elias realized something profound. They were learning, but they were also recognizing. They could not fully comprehend humanity, but they could witness it. Hours passed like this, a silent dance of presence, endurance, and emotion. Elias' body grew tired, his hands ached, and his mind was stretched to the limit. Yet he did not retreat. He did not flinch. He remained a beacon of human resilience. Finally, as the night crept toward dawn, both Watchers began to withdraw, their forms flickering, fading. The house returned to its quiet state, the vibrations softening, the shadows settling. Elias sank into a chair, exhausted but unbroken. Marrow sat beside him, her hand finding his. "You did well," she said softly. "They recognize us now. They may never understand, but they see. That is the first victory." Elias nodded, relief and pride flooding through him. The night had been a test, but humans had endured. Humans had been seen, acknowledged, and had made their presence undeniable. The strength of humanity was not in weapons or power or technology. It was in courage, presence, and the ability to endure the unknown without surrendering. As dawn broke fully, painting the study in warm light, Elias realized the truth of Marrow's words. Humanity was unpredictable. Humanity was resilient. Humanity could not be measured, controlled, or conquered by beings, however ancient or intelligent, who did not understand the depth of human presence. And for the first time, Elias felt not just relief but hope. The Watchers would return. The challenges would grow. But humans, he and Marrow, had proven something essential. Humanity endured. Humanity persevered. Humanity would never bow. And in that endurance, in that presence, Elias felt the spirit of his father watching over him, guiding him. The test had begun, but humans were ready. The morning light spilled through the tall windows, yet the house felt heavier than before. The air was thick with an energy Elias could feel in his bones. Last night had been a test, a subtle, patient observation by the watchers, but now he sensed something greater approaching, something that would require more than endurance. Meryl moved through the study with quiet determination, gathering papers, notebooks, and maps. Her expression was serious, her movements precise. Elias watched her, feeling a mixture of awe and urgency. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm preparing," Meryl said. "Last night was just the beginning. Your father's work, it goes beyond this house. It reaches further than the watchers we saw. He left a plan, a way to ensure humanity survives their attention. We need to understand it." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him. His father's death had left a void, but it had also left a path, a legacy of knowledge and foresight. Elias knew now that humanity was not simply being observed. They were being tested, prepared for something larger, something that could touch the world itself. He approached the desk, scanning the notebook pages. His father's handwriting was hurried, filled with symbols, annotations, and diagrams that seemed to pulse with meaning. There were notes about energy flows, observation patterns, and human responses to extreme presence. But one section stood out, labeled in bold, urgent letters: the override. If the Watchers attempt planetary influence, humanity must remain present, unbroken, unyielding. Elias read aloud, his voice trembling slightly. "Override planetary influence." Marrow's gaze hardened. "They are patient, but their scope is vast. They watch species across worlds. They analyze civilizations, nudging and observing outcomes. Last night they tested us personally, but now they may attempt to influence more than just us. They could try to silence humanity entirely." Elia's stomach twisted. The scale was unimaginable. Last night had been frightening, but this could affect the entire planet. Yet beneath the fear he felt a spark of resolve. Humanity was unpredictable. Humanity endured. And if his father had left a way to resist, they could rise to meet the challenge. "Show me," he said firmly. "Show me the plan." Marrow nodded, spreading out maps and diagrams across the desk. They depicted energy flows, planetary alignments, and locations of ancient structures his father had discovered. Symbols indicated nodes of power, places where human presence could amplify natural energy. Elias studied them closely, recognizing that the plan relied not on technology alone, but on something uniquely human: awareness, connection, and courage. "Your father knew that humans cannot be controlled," Marrow explained. "Our presence matters. Our awareness matters. Every thought, every emotion, every action contributes to a network of resistance. The Watchers cannot fully comprehend it. They can observe, they can influence, but they cannot dominate what they cannot measure." Elias felt a surge of pride. His father had left them more than knowledge, he had left them hope. Humans were resilient, and that resilience could be a shield against forces beyond comprehension. "We need to activate the nodes," Marrow continued. "They are scattered across the planet. Some are known locations, others hidden. Your father prepared them, but we must coordinate presence. Humanity must remain awake, alert, aware. That is the only way to counter planetary influence." Elias' mind raced. How could a few people influence the entire planet? But as Marrow explained, it wasn't about numbers. It was about focus, intention, and presence. Human awareness itself was a force, one that the Watchers could observe but not fully manipulate. He studied the diagrams. One node was near the old lighthouse on the coast, another in a mountain cave far inland, and several others in places humanity had long forgotten or ignored. Each node required human presence, synchronized awareness, and an understanding of the energy flows his father had mapped. "Do we go to each node ourselves?" Elias asked, the magnitude of the task sinking in. Marrow shook her head. No, that would take too long. Humanity itself must participate. Your father left instructions for a way to broadcast presence, to synchronize awareness across the planet. It relies on human connection, emotion, attention, intent. We guide it, but humans power it. Elia's chest tightened. The responsibility was enormous, but he felt determination rising in him. Humans had faced impossible odds before: wars, plagues, disasters. They had endured, and now their endurance was required in a way that transcended normal understanding. Marrow led him to a hidden chamber beneath the study, a space he had never seen before. The walls were lined with strange crystals, symbols etched into the floor, and devices that pulsed faintly with energy. Elias recognized them from his father's diagrams. They were the interface nodes, the anchors for the planetary presence network. These amplify human awareness, Marrow explained. They connect us, synchronize us, and project presence outward. The Watchers will feel it. They will test it, but if we succeed, humanity cannot be silenced. Elias nodded, stepping into the chamber. The crystals seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. He closed his eyes, focusing on the awareness, the emotions, the courage that had carried him through the previous nights. He imagined the presence extending outward, touching the nodes, spreading across the world, connecting humans everywhere. The room vibrated, subtle at first, then stronger. Elias felt energy flowing through him, through Marrow, through the crystals. It was as if the planet itself responded, alive and aware. Shadows and light danced across the walls, patterns shifting, forming shapes that seemed both familiar and alien. The Watchers had noticed. They were observing, testing, learning. But humanity's presence was strong, undeniable. Hours passed. The chamber hummed with energy, the network of nodes reacting to awareness, intention, and courage. Elias felt exhaustion creeping in, but he did not falter. He could sense Marrow beside him, steady and unwavering. Together, they maintained focus, channeling presence into the world. Suddenly, the energy intensified. The chamber vibrated violently, and a ripple of light shot across the floor, striking the crystals. Elias opened his eyes to see a form materializing in the room, larger than before, more defined, more imposing. It was a Watcher, but unlike any they had encountered. Its form radiated calculation, patience, and expectation. "They've come," Marrow whispered. "They're testing the network, our presence. Do not break focus." Elias' heart raced. The Watcher's gaze seemed to pierce through him, probing every thought, every emotion. He felt fear rise, but he pushed it down, replacing it with determination. Humanity endured. Humanity persisted. Humanity could not be controlled. He focused on the awareness, the presence, the connection. He felt it flow through him into the nodes across the planet. The Watcher flickered, uncertain, challenged by what it sensed. It had never encountered a species that could project presence in such a deliberate, coordinated way. Marrow's voice was steady beside him. "Do not falter. We are the proof they cannot control. We are humanity." Elias nodded, pushing fear aside. He allowed courage, connection, and endurance to radiate outward. The chamber pulsed with energy, the crystals glowing brighter, the nodes resonating in harmony. The Watcher's form wavered, flickering in and out, unable to grasp the strength of human presence. Hours passed like this. Time lost meaning. Daylight came and went unnoticed. But slowly, imperceptibly, the Watcher began to retreat. Its form dissipated, leaving the chamber in quiet resonance. Elias slumped to the floor, exhausted but triumphant. Marrow knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We have made a mark," she said softly. "They may not understand, but they see. Humanity cannot be silenced, not while we endure." Elias nodded, relief and pride flooding through him. They had faced the Watchers directly, tested against cosmic beings of unimaginable patience and intelligence, and humanity had not faltered. They had endured. They had persisted. They had made themselves known. As the chamber settled into quiet, Elias realized something profound. The challenge was far from over. The Watchers would return, testing humanity again, probing deeper. But the strength he felt, the connection, the presence, the courage, was undeniable. Humans were unpredictable. Humans endured, and that was a force no observer, however ancient, could overcome. Marrow rose, helping Elias to his feet. "We rest for now," she said. "But tomorrow we continue. The plan your father left is vast, and humanity's endurance will be tested across the planet. We are only at the beginning." Elias looked out through the windows, seeing the sun rise over the horizon. The world seemed peaceful, unaware of the cosmic eyes watching it. But he knew the truth now. Humanity was being tested. Humanity was being observed. And humanity was stronger, braver, and more enduring than the Watchers could comprehend. He took a deep breath, feeling the connection to the world, to Marrow, and to the memory of his father. Humanity endured, humanity resisted, humanity persisted. And they would continue to do so, no matter the challenge. For the first time, Elias understood the full weight of his father's plan and the full power of humanity's presence. The battle for the planet was only beginning, but humanity was ready. The night had arrived again, darker than usual, with clouds rolling across the sky in slow, heavy waves. Elias stood at the center of the chamber beneath the study, the crystals around him glowing softly. Marrow's hand found his, their fingers intertwined. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with energy from the network of nodes that they had activated. Every human connection, every heartbeat, every thought of courage and endurance radiated outward, creating a presence that no observer could ignore. "This is it," Marrow whispered, her voice steady but carrying the weight of urgency. "Tonight they will attempt to test the planet itself. We must hold. We must endure. We are humanity." Elias nodded, feeling a surge of determination. He had survived the night before, faced the Watchers directly, and activated the network of nodes his father had left behind. But now the challenge was greater. It was no longer just observation or small tests. It was a planetary-scale examination of human resilience. The first wave came suddenly. Shadows stretched across the room, twisting unnaturally, as if the walls themselves were bending under the presence of beings from another dimension. The Watchers appeared, larger, more defined, and more numerous than ever. Their forms shimmered, translucent yet radiant, flickering in and out of sight. Elias could feel the pressure of their awareness pressing against him, trying to measure, to influence, to bend the very essence of humanity. Marrow squeezed his hand. "Remember what your father taught us: presence, awareness, connection. Do not let fear control you." Elias drew a deep breath, focusing on everything that made him human. He thought of his father, of Marrow, of the countless lives across the world connected through the network. He focused on courage, resilience, and awareness, the very qualities the Watchers could not quantify or control. The Watchers surged closer, probing, testing, attempting to influence human consciousness on a global scale. Elias could feel their presence trying to disrupt the network, to isolate him and Marrow. But the energy of human endurance pushed back. Across the world, countless humans, unaware of the cosmic struggle unfolding, were participating simply by being present, awake, aware. Their emotions, intentions, and connections strengthened the network. The chamber vibrated violently. Crystals pulsed, sending waves of energy through the house and outward, touching the nodes placed across the planet. Elias felt exhaustion pressing against him, his body trembling. But he did not falter. Humans endured. Humans persisted. And humans, when aware and united, could create a force no observer could fully understand. A Watcher materialized fully in the room, its form enormous and almost humanoid but flickering in impossible ways. It reached toward Elias, probing his mind, seeking weakness. Fear threatened to rise, but he closed his eyes and focused, allowing his humanity to flow through him. He thought of Marrow, their connection, the bond that had carried them through the darkest nights. He thought of the world outside, of humans everywhere, and he let that energy extend outward. The Watcher hesitated. Its form shivered, uncertain, unable to process the strength of presence it was encountering. Elias felt a thrill of hope. Humanity could endure not just by will but by connection. They could withstand forces no being, however ancient, could fully comprehend. Marrow joined him, amplifying the energy, adding her awareness and courage to the network. Together, they became a beacon, a node of human presence that radiated across the planet. The Watchers faltered, unsure how to proceed. Their attempts at influence weakened, disrupted by the sheer unpredictability of human connection. Hours passed in this tense struggle. The chamber shook, the crystals flaring in response to the cosmic attention. Elias and Marrow remained steadfast, breathing steadily, focused on the network and the world beyond. Fatigue pressed against them, but they would not yield. They were humanity incarnate, courage, endurance, and connection made manifest. Then came a breakthrough. The largest Watcher, the one that had been probing the deepest, began to shimmer and distort. It moved backward, as if reconsidering its actions. Elias sensed recognition. The Watchers were beginning to understand, not fully, but enough to see that humans could not be controlled, measured, or dominated. Marrow's voice broke through the tension. They see now. They may not understand, but they recognize. Humanity is unclassifiable. Elias nodded, the realization filling him with awe and relief. This was what his father had intended. Humans could be tested, observed, even challenged on a planetary scale. But their presence, awareness, and connection were forces no observer could suppress. The Watchers began to retreat, one by one, their forms flickering and fading. The energy in the chamber slowly returned to a steady hum, the crystals glowing softly, resonating with the planet rather than reacting violently. Elias sank to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. Marrow knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We did it," she said softly. "They have seen. Humanity endures." Elias felt relief wash over him, but he also felt the weight of the struggle. The night had tested them beyond anything he had imagined. But it had also proven something essential. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and enduring. That was their strength, their power, and their gift. He rose slowly, looking out through the windows at the first light of dawn. The world seemed peaceful, unaware of the cosmic attention it had just experienced. Yet he knew the truth. Humanity had been tested, observed, and had not faltered. Their presence was undeniable, their connection unbroken, and their courage unwavering. Marrow joined him at the window, her expression softening. "Your father believed in humans," she said, "even when the world did not, even when he could not see the full outcome. He knew that humanity could endure, could resist, could rise to meet the impossible." Elias nodded, thinking of his father's legacy. The notebooks, the diagrams, the network of nodes, all were part of a plan to protect humanity from forces beyond comprehension, and it had worked. Humans had not only survived, they had proven themselves unclassifiable, unpredictable, and strong. "Do you think they will return?" Elias asked, turning to Marrow. "Perhaps," she said, her voice calm, "but it will not matter. We have shown them what humans are. Presence, awareness, endurance, these are qualities no observer can suppress. Humanity will continue, we will continue, and we will endure." Elias felt a swell of pride and hope. Humanity had faced a cosmic test and emerged stronger. They had been observed by beings of unimaginable intelligence and patience, and they had persisted. They had proven that courage, connection, and presence were forces beyond measurement, beyond control, beyond conquest. He looked around the chamber, at the crystals still glowing softly, the symbols etched into the floor, and the remnants of energy that hummed through the air. It was a testament to human resilience, to foresight, and to the enduring spirit his father had left behind. Marrow placed a hand on his cheek, her eyes meeting his. "We are not alone," she said. "Humanity is not alone. Your father prepared us, yes, but every person, every life across the planet contributed. We are connected, and that connection is stronger than any test, any observer, any challenge." Elias took her hand, squeezing it firmly. "Then we endure," he said, his voice steady. "We persist. We rise. That is what humans do." The morning light filled the chamber, illuminating the crystals, the symbols, and the faces of Elias and Marrow. The Watchers had retreated, their tests complete, their observation challenged. Humanity had passed, not by hiding, not by fleeing, but by being present, aware, and unyielding. Outside, the world stirred. Birds sang, the wind rustled through trees, and humans went about their daily lives, unaware of the cosmic eyes that had watched them. Yet the legacy of the night remained, invisible but potent. Presence, awareness, endurance. These were qualities humanity had proven, and no force, however ancient or intelligent, could ever suppress them. Elias and Marrow stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the sun, the coolness of the air, and the pulse of the living world beneath their feet. They had faced the impossible, endured the test, and emerged victorious, not through power, not through control, but through being human. Marrow smiled, a mixture of relief and pride on her face. "Your father would be proud," she said softly. "Humanity has proven itself as he always believed it could." Elias looked out over the horizon, the wind brushing against his face. "We are more than they can understand," he said. "We endure, we persist, and we will continue no matter what comes next." The Watchers might return, and the universe might hold challenges beyond imagining. But humanity had proven its strength in the most profound way, through courage, connection, and presence. And that was a force no observer, no matter how ancient, could ever overcome. As the sun climbed higher, casting light across the land, Elias knew the truth. Humanity endured, humanity persisted, and humanity would continue to rise, unpredictable, unyielding, and unbroken. The test was complete, but humanity's story was far from over. And for the first time since his father's funeral, Elias felt a sense of peace. They had faced the unknown, confronted forces beyond comprehension, and emerged stronger. Humanity had endured. Humanity had persisted. Humanity would never bow, and that was enough.